before the Forsaken, before the breaking of the world, there was a woman named Mierin Eronaile. Brilliant, ambitious, unmatched in her pursuit of power. She sought a force beyond comprehension. What she uncovered shattered existence itself.
Welcome to Brothers of Time. I'm Louis. Today we're going to journey through one of the most perilous and exciting characters in the Wheel of Time series, Lanfear. This video is intended for viewers of the TV show and also readers of the book series who want to go deeper into the characters and lore of the series.
We're going to go into the backstory of Lanfear and seek out what her intentions were. Won't spoil anything for viewers of the TV show at about season 3 or readers of the book, at least once you've met her. So, who was Lanfear? What drove her to the shadow? And how did her choices shape the fate of the world? Louis, do you want to take us through her origin story?
Before Lanfear, there was a researcher called Mierin Eronaile. In the Age of Legends, before the Dark One was released, she was a researcher at the Collam Daan University. She had a relationship with Lews Therin when they were both much younger, but it didn't last. This relationship was fundamental to Lanfear's story and shaped much of her future. As a researcher, she wasn't the most accomplished or the most distinguished, but clearly ambitious. But it was this very ambition that led to catastrophe. Mierin was as strong as a woman could be in the one power. However, she did not earn a third name, such as Lews Therin, and this kind of name is seen as a Nobel Prize equivalent. It's an award for significant contribution. In her quest to gain this, Mierin, alongside her colleague Baidaman, drilled into what they believed was a pure energy reservoir. Both women and men could tap this source, and it seemed like they had found something that would change the world for the better. Instead, the energy source that they found was the true power, and all that they did was breach the infamous Dark One's prison, which became known as the Bull. The world-renowned Collam Daan was destroyed, and the Sharom, the great floating sphere, fell to the ground with an earth-shattering crash. Many people died. Somehow, Mierin survived and lived to see the destruction her actions unleashed. So, Ollie, do you want to expand a little bit on the relationship between Lews Therin and Lanfear?
Yeah, thanks, Lou. So, as Louis mentioned earlier, Lews and Mierin were a relationship, but that relationship ended. Mierin's hunger for status wasn't subtle, and Lews Therin saw it clearly. She loved the prestige, not the man. When he got together with Ileana, Mierin's passion turned into obsession. She made a series of public attempts to get him back, but was never successful. The dragon had found love with another woman. Throughout the TV and book interactions with Rand Thor, you see that Lanfear still wants this relationship. She has moved her obsessions over to Rand. Sometimes it seems a bit like she's talking to Lews Therin when she talks to Rand, and this is extremely confusing for our young hero. Couple this with Lanfear's exceptional beauty, and you can see that for this young man, Lanfear is the ultimate temptation that haunts him through all of their interactions. Louis, I've got a question. Do you think she really loved Lews Therin?
Well, love obviously is a strong emotion. Love, hate, they kind of go hand in hand, don't they, often in literature and things like this. She really wants to get him back, doesn't she? He spurned her. But yeah, maybe at the beginning she really did love him, and that's why she had such strong feelings for him.
I sometimes wonder if it's more like it's like a game for her. Like he was a conquest, something to kind of win, because he was this third named guy, wasn't he? But, you know, it's really interesting, isn't it? It's just how did this geek, university researcher become the most feared woman of power in the world?
Well, for that we need to go through Lanfear's descent into the shadow. After escaping the exploding Sharom Collam Daan, Mierin's ambitions took a darker turn. Her heart hardened by the loss of Lews Therin, and perhaps shocked and guilt-ridden from the actions she had taken to free the Dark One. Her desire for power and possession started to consume her. Decadence and violence crept into society. Society was collapsing, and the world was teetering on the edge of something terrible. This period of collapse was quite slow, somewhere between 80 and 110 years, but it grew darker and worse. People started openly declaring for the Dark One, and Mierin was one of the first. She adopted a new identity, Lanfear, meaning daughter of the night, the only Forsaken ever to choose her own name. Wolves call her Moon Hunter, due to her skill in the world of dreams. So why did Mierin this academic researcher turned to the shadow. It is thought that her desire for the power that she had discovered was a strong reason. And like I mentioned earlier, alongside this, she wanted to get Lews Therin back and invested much of her efforts in trying to get him to turn to the shadow. She liked to offer power and riches to people. We see this a little bit in the books with Rand, Perrin and Mat. And these are the kinds of things that she coveted: power, prestige. Lanfear's motives are absolutely fascinating. She's definitely not 100% on the side of the Dark One ever. She's 100% on Lanfear's side at all times. Sometimes she seems to be on Rand's side. So, Ollie, what went wrong for Lanfear and the rest of the Forsaken that ended up with them all being sealed away with the Dark One?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. So obviously you had this period of collapse. You have the kind of society started to collapse, and then people started to openly declare for the shadow. And that basically was the start of the War of Power. And it was this incredibly terrible war. And the forces of the dark were kind of obviously fighting hard against the forces of the light. And I think that really only kicked off once enough people had sort of declared for the shadow. Then armies started to form, and then they started to attack the cities where the people of the light lived. Now, the world which they come from was very peaceful, was like a utopia. So all these peaceful people on the side of the light had never been involved in fighting. So actually, right at the beginning of this war, the kind of dark forces were able to make really quick gains, take over swathes of the kind of continents. And Lanfear, as a Forsaken, was one of the most powerful channelers. She's, as Louis mentioned earlier, you cannot be more powerful than Lanfear. She's the top power that a woman can get to. So she could have been a major player in this war. However, she preferred to work in the background. What this led is to the male Forsaken, who have that little bit more power themselves. Ishamael and Demandred were the ones that led the forces of the dark in the battle, and this then led to Ishamael being given the prestige of becoming Nameless. I think they had a slightly different name from back in the War of Power, but basically the first among the chosen was a role that Ishamael grabbed for himself in this time. And I think this can only have further hardened Lanfear's power-hungry heart. Lanfear was an absolute master of the world of dreams to Lanriod, and it's thought that this is where she made most of her battles happen in the War of Power. We don't have many records that have survived this War of Power, but Lanfear's name lives on for the terrible deeds she carried out, and she personally tried to convert Lews Therin many times to the Shadow. The Light was able to rally around the Aes Sedai, and they started to make gains back in their territory that they had lost. But then came the Shadow Spawn, which were creatures created by one of the Forsaken Agenor, a never-ending source of Trollocs and Faiths, incredible fighters, and they slowly began to wear the forces of the Light down. So as the Aes Sedai argued and hesitated, Lews Therin made a desperate choice. He took his 100 companions, all men, to the site of the boar, now called Shael Ghul, with a plan to seal the Dark One back in his prison. It is not known why, but Lanfear and all the rest of the Forsaken were present at the boar at the point that Lews Therin took his 100 companions there. Perhaps they got wind of this attack that Lews was bringing, and the Dark One wanted all of his best fighters there to fight them off. But the ultimate outcome was that the Dark One and his chief lieutenants were sealed back in the boar. So Louis, what were Lanfear's strengths and abilities that made her such a powerful enemy of the light?
Lanfear was one of the most potent channelers of her time. Her strength in the one power, Saidar, is rivaled by only a select few, Semirhage, and then much later in the Third Age, Olivia. So as I've just mentioned in Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time Companion, Lanfear is listed as having a power of 1 brackets plus 12, which is the highest for a female. In the Third Age, I just mentioned that Olivia, an ex-Damani from Shonchan, is the only other woman who can match this power. And then there's Semirhage as well, another of the Forsaken. However, Lanfear's true power lay in her manipulative skills and deep understanding of the human psyche. She was an absolute master of the Dreamworld, so much so that the wolves gave her a name, Moonhunter, and they feared her. She considered the Dreamworld her personal domain, using it to infiltrate dreams, gather intelligence, and torment her adversaries. They've covered this pretty well in the TV series. They show how in Series 2 she's able to find Rand in his dreams, and more recently she's able to infiltrate Egwene's dreams as well. She's also a master of disguise. There's a good number of disguises she takes in the books. She's Selene, this damsel in distress, at a portal stone in another world that Rand comes across with Hurin, I think. Then she is also a novice in the White Tower, Elsa Grimwell. She's posing as her. Then she's an old hag in Tel and Riyadh. I think Egwene meets her there. And out in the Aiel Waste, she's with the travelling caravan as a peddler named Kaili Shayogi.
So for viewers of the TV series or readers of the books, beware. Lanfear is out. She is actively working on her own goals. but is a key leader of the Dark One's forces. She could disguise herself as anyone. She can appear in your dreams at will. She is the most powerful female channeler ever to live, and she wants two things: power and the dragon.